want to welcome everyone to the Gainesville End-of-Life Doulas monthly Zoom meeting. Today is February 12th, 2025. My name is Shanti Vani, and I'll be co-facilitating this meeting. We have a special guest today, and that's Angela Dragon, and she is an expert in helping people to clear their excess material, and I would say also body, mind, spirit clearing and cleansing. So I'm just very happy to be here, and I want to go ahead and introduce Angela, and you can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Shanti. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And thank you all for sharing just a little bit more about what brought you here today. It's always helpful for me to hear that even prior to jumping into presentation mode, because then I can kind of understand a little bit already about the common struggles that many of you are facing, common challenges, I should say. Also, if you see me kind of doing this, it's because I just got multifocal lenses. I'm officially at that age, and they're not quite right. I need to go back to my eye doctor. So to actually see your names, their tiny little names on the screen, I have to kind of lean in. So forgive me if I'm zooming in and out a little bit. So today we're going to talk about some of the challenges of having clutter or just extra stuff in our homes. We'll talk about the cost, I call it the hidden cost of clutter. Some of you probably already know the very obvious cost of clutter, but sometimes there are hidden costs as well. So just helping to get our mindset around why it's harmful to have too much stuff or what feels like too much stuff for ourselves and our own needs. And then the flip side of that, the benefits of having a more simplified home and a simplified life. And as Shanti kind of hinted at, it's never just about the stuff. That's why the presentation title is never just about the stuff. We're going to confront the clutter and the underlying reasons why we hold on to things or why we struggle with letting things go. Because usually it's almost never just about the actual things themselves. It's about old identities, letting go of old hobbies, processing grief. It's Shanti's realm of how do we process our grief of even our past selves or a lost loved one. And this always stirs up a lot. So thank you all for courageously being here and being willing to share. So before we dive in, for anything I facilitate, whether it's a women's circle or an ecstatic dance or even just a simple Zoom meeting like this, I always like to have some basic guidelines in order to ideally create some emotional safety for all of us to share. Some of you have already shared from your heart and shared some vulnerable things, so I really appreciate your trust in all of us to hold space for that. So the three guidelines that are my preferences are confidentiality. So for those of you on camera, if you could just wave your hand saying, I agree to full confidentiality. What happens here stays here. We agree to not talk about each other later. Thank you. Thank you for popping on camera, a couple of you too. So strict confidentiality is guideline number one. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat to make sure I don't miss anything. It's like speaker view, right? So if anyone doesn't know, sorry, just a quick housekeeping thing too. So in the top right corner, if you don't already know, if you're not already familiar with Zoom, when you click on view, you can do speaker view or grid view. I have you on grid view, so you'll see my eyes bouncing around to make sure I can see everyone who's on camera at the same time. If you just want to see me, then you're welcome to do speaker view if that feels more easeful. Some people prefer to see all the faces, and some people prefer just to see one person at a time. So confidentiality is the first guideline. Second guideline is brevity. We have, 40 minutes left or so. And so we just want to be mindful to have enough time to share and feel complete in your sharing, but be mindful that I'm an extrovert. There are introverts, I'm sure, in the room. We want to make sure that introverts have time to speak as well. And for anyone who just has to work up some courage, we want to make sure we give them space. So brevity, just being mindful of how much time you're speaking is important. And then the third guideline is what I call holding space, which is very simply just if one person's speaking, we are giving our full awareness to that person. And I think many of us, especially those of us who are feminine essenced beings in the world, we tend to want to jump in with our own story as a way of connecting. And at least for the context of this gathering, I think it's really important that we just simply hold space. We don't jump in and try to fix anything. We don't offer advice unless it's requested. Or if we do want to offer advice, we say, hey, I have a tip for that. Are you available to receive that? Always getting consent before jumping in and sharing. So really just basically holding space means listening, being fully present without trying to fix anything or share from our own experience. Does that make sense so far? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. My intention is for this to be a little bit interactive with as much time as we can have for each of you to jump in as you would like to do. Thank you, Ashley, for popping on camera for that. So I will share some things and then give you an opportunity to share a little bit more about your experiences as well. And we'll kind of jump back and forth between those two things. And if we have time, maybe have 5 or 10 minutes at the end for a little bit of Q&A. So to jump right in, talking about emotional attachment, that's the first thing. But as I hinted at earlier, it's never just about the stuff. So I think being aware of our emotions around the items can be super helpful. So if maybe 2 or 3 of you want to share, I would love to hear from a couple of you of imagine one thing in your home that you feel that emotional pull of attachment to, but that you're like, this doesn't belong in my life, really. But there's some like pulling on your heartstrings kind of feeling where you're like, oh, I don't actually need that thing, but I paid good money for it, or somebody gave it to me as a gift, or oh, I have a memory attached to it. It used to be my favorite dress that doesn't fit anymore. I've heard it all, trust me. So we can be attached to all kinds of things. So I would love to hear from a couple of you if you feel like sharing just an example of something that you're attached to, but that you kind of want to let go of. And then if you feel available for it, I can coach you through it while we all listen in if you would like that. So just feel free to come off mute as you are ready.
I'm Charles, and I want to get rid of paperwork from my job, from everywhere that is probably not that important to anyone but me. But every time I go through and I get it done, but then I go look at it again and say I didn't do a good job. So
All
I've
right.
got to find a way to get peace with pretty much getting rid of it.
Mhm.
I guess it's kind of weird, but
No, I don't think that's weird at all. Thank you for sharing that, Charles. Are you available for me to talk through it with you a little bit?
sure.
Yes, what you said that stood out to me just now is I feel like I didn't do a good enough job. So I'm curious about that piece of it of um does it feel like it's too many pieces of paper, like they don't fit in the container that you have assigned for them, or feeling like it should be different than it is? I'm curious.
Yes, I look back at it and I say, why do I still have this? And I just feel, I guess I'm going through a transition in my life where, is there a term called minimalist? Minimalist, I can't pronounce it that well.
Yeah, you got it.
Anyway, I, I just kind of want to be clear. Well, wait a minute. Let me back up a little bit. I'm one of them people. I feel like as soon as I get rid of it, I need it.
Mm,
So I got to get past that. And the other thing is that I just don't. I want space in my home. I don't want to feel every space needs to be have something in it. And I
mm.
think that's one of my problems too.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that because I think I see people nodding and I saw something pop up in the chat of that this is relatable. Um, I can say a lot about this. So I'll just say a couple things about it. Paperwork, I call advanced level decluttering most of the time because it really is a little more tedious, a little less visually exciting to declutter. Like there's not a dramatic before and after with decluttering paperwork, but it seems to stir up the same stuff as decluttering any other thing. So as I'm hearing, just to reflect for a moment, I'm hearing that you kind of want to be more of a minimalist than you are, that you're in that stage of life. And I call it just a quick little thing. I call it the bell curve of stuff, where it's like 20s, maybe like 20s something, college age, whatever. We don't have very many things, right? Like we're living in a dorm, we're living in a small apartment. We don't really care about a lot of stuff. But then 30s, 40s, 50s, like we collect, collect, collect. Maybe we have kids, maybe we have grandkids, and it's like the peak of the most stuff we have. And then suddenly like 60s, 70s, 80s, it's like, oh, wait. I don't want all this stuff. It feels burdensome to have all this stuff. And so there is that cycle of, um, I call it the bell curve of stuff is my term for it. So just being aware that you're in a season of your life where you're like, oh, this feels like too much. And it is to me a felt sense. Like when we look around our homes or we look around a room or we look in our closet or in our cabinets, we can feel this feels like too much for me, or this feels just right, or feels like not enough. And everybody's different with these things. I've worked with many clients who are definitely a maximalist, where they have a lot of things and they love all their things. And I call actually my main lead organizer who's worked, I have 5 team members right now. My main lead organizer who's worked with me from the beginning, just about, I call her the maximalist to my minimalism, because I have a 1-bedroom apartment. I don't like having a lot of stuff at all. She has a big house with a million things, but she can find every single thing in her house. But it really, I call her the resourceful one in our business and friendship relationships. So really, it's a noticing, I think, Charles, for you specifically, for that example, I think it's really nice that you're noticing that of like, oh, this just feels like too much stuff. And I encourage you to use gentle language also with yourself. I think all of us can be really hard on ourselves of like, oh, I didn't do a good enough job. That language usually isn't very helpful. So conjuring up a little more compassion for oneself can be helpful to start. And also, this is a very practical tip, I think, for all of you probably, is having a physical limit for it's a certain category of things. So like, let's say you just have, I'm in my office, so I'm looking at my filing cabinet or my filing bin. I have just one bin that's, a solid bin with the hanging file folders, and that's my limit for paper. I had a bunch of health challenges over the last couple of years, and so the health file got giant. And so I had to declutter some of the other things in order to still fit it in that space. But having a limit, having a container of like, okay, these are all the photos I'm keeping. They have to fit in this bookshelf, or they have to fit in these 5 albums. That having a physical limit to things can be super helpful for us. So Charles, I could say a lot more, but that's those are my just couple of tips for now. Who else? I hope that was helpful. Who else would like to share? Jean, I think you
Yeah,
raised.
I would, and it'll be brief, but I think that a lot of people have this issue. I'm in my mid 70s. I have 4 children who are adults, and one of them has children, so I have grandchildren. The other day, I ran across my oldest son's teddy bear, which is really big, and he was called Big Bear. And I called Daniel and I said, "Hey, Daniel, I just found Big Bear. Should I bring him to you?" And Daniel goes, "I don't even remember that." And you can just get rid of that, but I can't just get rid of it. I cannot imagine it in the bottom of a landfill. So I'm trying to think of something creative to do with it. He's really pretty worn out. And so, I'm picturing this funeral pyre or something for Big Bear. I don't know what to do with things that have a sentimental value to them, such as that. My house is full of that.
Yes.
So if you can help me with that, I would really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Jean. I have lots of tips for this. Okay, so one thing you can do is take a photo of it if there isn't already a photo. Sometimes that can take the edge off enough that we can then figure out a new home for it. So that's a tip. That's usually, I feel like for Big Bear, that's a stronger pull than like an average thing. Because there are levels to this, right? There's like stuff that we're a little bit attached to, and then there's stuff that's big attachment. I think Big Bear is a little on the bigger end of things, understandably. So the photo might not work, but for other things with a little attachment, just taking a photo of a thing and being like, oh, I have proof that this thing existed in my life. Now I can pass it on. For Big Bear, and I've had so many clients do this and just immediately burst into tears, even clients who are like not into woo-woo stuff, kind of like I am. But so I call it hug it and let it go. So what you would do with Big Bear, and this applies to all of you with whatever those things are that have that emotional pull, is you would hold Big Bear. I don't know how big Big Bear is, but like hold Big Bear to your heart, and you would close your eyes and you would send Big Bear love, gratitude, whatever emotion you want to infuse, whatever emotions come up. Usually it's gratitude, some kind of memory will probably come up. You might cry. That's a very, like, half of our clients will cry when my team is in their home at some point, and that's part of the process of just, decluttering stirs up a lot of stuff. So hugging Big Bear, sending Big Bear gratitude for all the memories, and then from there, figuring out what to do with him. And I heard like Big Bear's a little old and raggedy maybe, and it's hard to donate like stuffed animals and those sorts of things. One tip related to that in general, like trying to find new homes for things, because that does take the edge off for sure, of like when we're trying to let things go that have sentimental value, finding a new owner who's really excited can be super helpful. And also, there are other ways, workarounds for that too. So one tip is the buy nothing groups on Facebook, which Facebook is problematic in lots of ways, but groups I think are super helpful on that platform. So many of you probably live in areas that have a local buy nothing group. And it's literally just I think it's a big nonprofit organization where you can just find your specific group. Like if you search buy nothing and then your city's name, like in Gainesville, I think we have 4 or 5 buy nothing groups. They usually start out as like buy nothing Gainesville was a whole big group. And then as the groups grew, it's like buy nothing East Gainesville, buy nothing Northwest, buy nothing campus, whatever they are. And in the buy nothing group, there's no bartering, trading, selling. It's just you're giving a thing or you're requesting a thing. And that brought me so much joy, especially in the early pandemic days. Like the buy nothing group was a soothing balm for all of the chaos of life at that time for me. And I continue to trade things with my neighbors. I'll share just a super quick story related to that because I think this is the magic of giving and receiving. So I buy eggs all the time. Eggs are a primary source of protein for me, and eggs have gotten continually very expensive. So I've been kind of mindful of that. And I posted in Buy Nothing, oh, I have all these egg cartons. I had like 20 of them that I saved up. I don't like to throw them away. Sometimes I take them to the farmer's market and give them to vendors. I just hadn't gone in a while. And so I posted them in my local Buy Nothing group and said, hey, does anybody need these for their eggs? Does anybody need these for art projects? And one woman said, a bunch of people responded and said yes. And then I picked one woman just randomly. And then she picked up all these things and said, oh, I know you like eggs. Can I leave you some eggs? I have a bunch of chickens. And so okay, the funny thing is about this story, I've never met this woman. I don't even know her face because her profile picture on Facebook is presumably her dog. And we just trade now, just as we would like for probably 2 years. I will save up a bunch of egg cartons, message her on Facebook Messenger. We don't even go through the group anymore because now we have a relationship. I leave them on my front porch. She picks them up and she'll leave me sometimes 2 dozen eggs. And she said it's her joy. It's like her gift to the universe of being able to give from her, well-loved backyard hens. So to me, that's some of the magic of this work is that I see so many times where clients will let something go and then suddenly I hear somebody else of like, oh, do you know where I can find blah, blah, blah. I actually just helped somebody get a brand new hot tub for themselves, which super like there's magic here. Anyway, that's a little off topic, but did I answer your questions so far of like how to try to let go?
Angela, I just have to say that your ideas are really creative. I especially like the hugging idea. And I can see how that can bring me some joy and some peace. And yeah, so I just want to tell you that you have a gift of sharing some great ideas. And thanks.
My pleasure.
I can see using that for things beyond Big Bear.
Yes, many things. Hug it and let it go can work really well. The only sticky part sometimes with that is then figuring out what to do with the thing. And so if it's like clothing or something that's a little bit easier, that doesn't have as much memory and emotion attached to it, then I encourage everyone to always have at least one. I usually use a Trader Joe's bag just because they're nice and sturdy. But have a bin or a box or a basket or something in the bottom of your closet always that when you try on clothing and it doesn't fit or it has a hole and you don't want to fix it or whatever's wrong with it or it's itchy fabric, don't put it back on the hanger. Just drop it, like constantly have a way of letting some things go. Shanti, did you have something you wanted to add there?
Well, yeah, I thought, I wouldn't want to burn a bear because it might have all this polyester, whatever, but I have a burial ground in my backyard where we'd have our cats and dogs. And I could see having a sweet little burial and telling your story and, something like that. It's just a little ritual there.
Yeah, more ritual, more ceremony for everything, 100%. And also, if you're going to end up donating a thing in the world, Big Bear or otherwise, just anything that's still potentially useful to other people in the world, I think that doing the hug it and let it go exercise makes that thing shinier in a thrift store. I swear there's some magic to that, where it's just like something is well loved and we infuse it with our gratitude. Like if something was a gift, extra little bonus tip here, if something was a gift and it's not really a thing that you want to keep in your life, I pass things on really quickly if I don't want them in my home. Like I receive the gift, I hold it to my heart, I send the person so much gratitude, and then I will donate that thing. But then I do think it makes the thing extra shiny for other people to want to pick up. So thank you, Jean, for giving me that prompt, because that's a lot of the things I was planning to talk about today at some point anyway. Glad it was helpful. Okay, moving right along, and we can circle back at the end if we have more time, if you had a burning question or comment that you wanted to share. So I talked about taking a photo, thanking the item, hugging it and letting it go. One thing that I find to be really helpful, and again, this is kind of more of a mindset thing, is let's say you have something that you used to love. Maybe it's like a dress that doesn't fit anymore. We've all been there. So let's say you have this dress that used to fit, you used to love it. Maybe it costs a lot of money. You're like, I spent good money on this. I've only worn it once. What do I do? Imagining someone in a thrift store picking that up and being like, oh, this is the perfect dress for me. Oh, I'm so excited about. Like imagining whatever that thing is in your life that you're like struggling to let go of, imagining someone finding it in a thrift store and being really excited about it, just kind of as a thought experiment, can be really helpful. Because I think many of us have the inclination of like, oh, I have this wonderful special treasure. I want to let it go and I want to see who gets it. I want to make sure it doesn't end up Big Bear in a landfill, right? We don't want that visual in our head. So instead, just imagine that like giving it the best chance it can have of not ending up in a landfill by just imagining who it can get to. And then, of course, I have a whole list on my website. So shameless plug, simplifyhomeorganizing.com. If you click on resources, I have a big long list of, if you're in Gainesville, in the area of Gainesville, I have a long list of local thrift stores. And we have like Reuse Planet, Repurpose Project. Like I have a place for just about everything. Sometimes stuff is truly just ready for a landfill, but a lot of things can get redistributed and reused in our community, at least here in Gainesville. We're rich in resources for that sort of thing. So under the resources tab on my website, I do have a list. And if you also have like random questions about like, where do I donate books or where can I donate this random object? Usually my team and I will be able to help you figure that out, even if it's virtual organizing, which I do also offer as like a side thing if you're not in the area. So you can also write a thank you letter to a person who gifted you a thing as kind of a way of processing, letting it go. And I'm a huge fan of gratitude letters. There's some psychology behind it that proves that boosts our connection to other people and our joy and our happiness. And so writing someone a letter, even if you didn't, like, you don't want to go overboard if you didn't like the thing that they gave you. And this is the case with my mother, whose love language is gift giving, to her minimalist daughter, which is a source of stress in our relationship around the holidays for sure. But I do still express my gratitude. I don't go overboard like, thanks so much for these things. I don't love any of them. I don't want to encourage that behavior, but I do think it's helpful just to, anytime we give someone a gift, it's the expression behind the gift that's the actual gift. Like the physical thing to me is unimportant compared to the expression of love or gratitude in gift giving. So that's just another quick tip. So talking about the hidden costs of clutter, we're going to get into this just a tiny bit. The average American produces more than 4 pounds of trash every day. And these are stats from like a year ago, so it's probably more than that now. The average American spends between 10 and 45 minutes every day looking for things. And that's average. And I know some of you don't have to share your stories with me about that specifically, but I imagine some of you can relate to like wasted time searching for things. So a benefit of having less stuff is that you can find things more easily. And that's one of the things I hear from after my team's been in a client's home. I hear from clients all the time, like I'll get a text sometimes a month later saying, oh my gosh, I cooked this big meal for my family from out of town and I could find everything that I needed. Oh my gosh, it took half as much time. Like all these miracles of being able to find what you need when you need it will save you money because then you don't rebuy things. It will save you time, so you're not wasting time looking for your car keys every day or looking for whatever that thing is that you misplaced or your glasses or, whatever, whatever the common object is that you will not be able to find. That will save you time and energy. So I won't spend too much time on that because it can get depressing, but I will share one tip for slowing the inflow of stuff because that's honestly half the battle, right? Like that's like if your home feels cluttered, how did it get imbalanced, right? There's an imbalance. It's not homeostasis. And half of that is bringing in new things, whether we acquire them or purchase them. This is a whole can of worms that I won't delve into too much right now. I could do a 3-day workshop just on this topic alone, I think. But slowing the inflow and being mindful consumers is a huge part of this work. So one quick tip that will save you money and save you from having a cluttered home again. And Madeline, I see your hand raised. I'll get to you in just a moment. So ask yourself these 3 questions anytime you're shopping online or in person or acquiring a new thing, even if you're like at an event and somebody wants to give you a free pen. Anytime you're acquiring a new thing that's coming through your front door of your house, ask yourself first, check my notes, make sure I get it right. Where will I store this shiny new thing? Question number 1 is, where will I store it? Do I have room for this thing? And I can't tell you how many times I have stopped myself from buying a new pair of shoes. I'm like, okay, I can either do my only rule, bonus tip here, my only rule is 1 in, 1 out. Once a house has reached equilibrium and my team and I are done in a house, one thing comes in, something else has to go out. It's very logical, right? But it's easier said than done. So I'll look and see a shiny new pair of shoes in the world. I really love shoes. And I'll be like, oh, okay, my shoe rack is exactly full with the right amount of shoes. So either I can get rid of one pair of shoes or I don't buy the new pair of shoes. So question number 1 is, where will I store it? i.e., do I have space for this thing? And so that can help you right there. Like, oh, I don't have room for this. I guess I don't really want to buy it. Number 2, how long will I have it? And this again is like thinking about fast fashion and just buying cheap stuff because it's cheap, or even shopping at a thrift store, which I try to do that as much as possible. But even then, I can still acquire too many things if I'm not careful. So where will I keep it? How long will I have it? So if you're thinking about buying something that's going to fall apart in like 2 months, I think of it as a spectrum of like really cheap fast fashion t-shirts all the way to cast iron skillet. Like cast iron skillet is like great grandparents can have it and pass it down, and 50 100 years from now someone can still use it, or more than that. So on a spectrum of like fast fashion to cast iron skillet, where is this item? Is this something I plan to have for a long time? And then the third question is, how will I dispose of it someday? How will I dispose of it someday? I love seeing some of you taking notes. Thank you. So I call it like the 3 gates. I've heard this referred to as from one of the many books I've read that I don't remember now. So if it passes through the first gate of where will I keep it? Do I have room for it? And you say yes. Okay, how long do I expect to have it? I think I'll have this for many years. And then you get to how will I dispose of it someday? And imagining it in a landfill is a really easy way to not buy so much stuff. Because if it's like a plastic thing, you're like, oh, wow, this is going to be around forever. It's not something that's not easily recyclable. Recycling takes lots of energy and creates more chemicals in the world anyway. I mean, it's a whole can of worms again that I won't get in. I know too much, unfortunately, about these things now. But just thinking about these things can help you just be a more mindful consumer, which can then lead to you having less clutter in your home and not acquiring things so much. And again, getting to that equilibrium where you're like, I have the right amount of stuff for the person I am and the person I am becoming, and not holding on to that old identity of whatever we used to do, whether it's art projects that are incomplete that we need to let go of, or old paperwork from a job. Like I said, this is always about bigger stuff, right? It's about our identities and our presence in the world. Madeline, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I'm not a consumer at all,
Mhm.
but I do live next to the Uptown apartment building complex, and they have 3 dumpsters. And I am constantly rescuing things from the dumpsters,
Mhm.
bringing them back, or picking up on the side of the road like a ladder back chair that needs to be recaned. And so one of the things I've started doing is looking up who canes chairs. And then I called someone in Alachua, and she came to the house and picked up the chair. I
Yay.
was thrilled to have it. She said, I have a garage full of chairs, but now it's hers. But the thought, I think it was Jean that said, I don't want to put it in a landfill. So I'll repaint something, and right now I'm collecting things again now to put in my garage sale.
Mhm.
Because I've moved so much, I don't have a lot that I have history with because I just got back here 3 years ago. But it's great because I do want to rescue from the landfills.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more fun. And then my house is pretty much furnished with it too. What's really nice and I like, but I'm just keeping the minimum. But then the stuff that I have trouble with are art supplies. I can use this. I can make cards out of this. I can do this art project. And fabric. And it's like, but it's like, yeah. And I have dresses that I've had when I was in high school, but I still wear them.
Yeah.
And then but the one in, one out is a really good thing that I like to do when I go to a thrift shop. If I buy something in a thrift shop, whatever it is, I have to put one out. And I have to get back to doing that because I don't want to fill up.
Yeah.
But there's lots of resources. I hadn't heard of Buy Nothing Group, so I'm going to look into that too. Thank you.
Yeah, they're really sweet. And you can start one too, like start and be the admin if you don't have one in your area. I think they have some kind of admin support and the home base of the nonprofit wherever that exists in the world. But it's such a joy. And it's kind of a pain sometimes because you have to like wait for the person to pick it up and sometimes they don't show up and it's a little wonky with that, but it can be really heartwarming, like my story with the eggs. It's like really the point of it is building connections and sharing resources in community, which I love. Love, love, love. Thank you for sharing. Can I make a quick comment about art and art supplies? Artists and teachers, some of our more challenging clients for for good reasons, because everything is potentially useful. Everything is potentially art. And so my tip for you, Madeline, overall is just to have a limit of like, okay, I'm going to keep fabric that fits in this much space or whatever storage solutions you have. I can guarantee you my team and I, if you were in your home, we would say, okay, how much do you have a whole craft room? Do you have an art room? Do you have like what do you have and how can we make it work for you where it doesn't get out of control and it still feels manageable? And overall, really, can you find what you need when you need it? It's like if we're saving all these art supplies and creative supplies, as long as we can find what we need. Like I said, my maximalist lead organizer has tons of things. She's a burlesque performer too. She has like boas and rhinestones galore. I mean, she just has so many things because she's a very creative person in that way, but she can find anything immediately in her house. So as long as you can find what you need and you need it, and as long as you have the space for those things, that's to me what's really important.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for your share. Okay, we have just a few minutes left. Does anybody else have a share anything they wanted to share about what we've discussed so far? Shanti?
So, yeah, my parents were in part of the civil rights movement as early as before I was born. So in 40s, 50s, 60s. And so dad died and I got all his papers and stuff, and mom died and I got all her stuff. And I really want to turn it into something that would see. I think for when I die, I think if I get a YouTube channel thing figured out really well, that could be there. But anyway, it's a lot. And I want to address too the emotional aspect of our holding on to things and what makes sense and what doesn't. So it takes so much time, but it's worth it, I guess, to at least grab the most important things first and put them into the computer and make them accessible and available so that our story and our parents' story, and I even have a great 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 grandfather who was in the Civil War, part of his story is there somehow. And in this digital age, kind of coming up to speed, but putting it together. And I love PowerPoint. I like PowerPoint because you can put pictures and words and then I just pop it into a YouTube video. And but it would take weeks and hours to do what I really would like to do. So it's just challenging.
Yeah, and there are online services because Shanti, I hear these things all the time of like, how do I document these things? And I think that's such a big need now for so many people, especially the generations that are around that age where they have the memories that are not digitized yet. I know some online services. I haven't used a lot of them myself, but there are places where you can like mail them a big box of photos and they scan all of them for you.
Yeah, but the problem is I have about 10,000, and so I need to go through and somewhat pick the very favorites and stuff. And
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, I just went from one laptop to another, and I was like going to give my laptop to my daughter, but I had to transfer photos, and one folder had 5,000. And so I was like, I gritted my teeth, but I did transfer them. And then I'll take the time to look, but anyway, I just want to encourage people, like, have faith and persist and make it fun. And I think if we do it together, or at least do these kinds of things where we inspire each other, it lightens the load. You don't feel so alone or so desperately like, yeah, the positive self-talk that Angela talks about is really important.
100%. Thank you, Shanti, for saying that. I 100% agree, because we can all be so hard on ourselves, especially when it comes to the pride of our home and not feeling like it's what we want it to be, or, oh, I need to keep these memories. What do I do? I'm not doing a good enough job, right? So just being aware of that negative self-talk and then saying, okay, is this actually important to me? And if it is actually important to me, how do I make space in my life? My blog is called Making Space with Angela Dragon. It's about making space, literal and figurative space. How do I make space in my life for this project of documenting the memories and the accomplishments of my ancestors? If it's really important, how do I make space for it? And that can apply to anything. If it's really important, how do I make space for it? The question. Lisa, I believe you had a question. When you're ready.
Yeah, this newfangled technology. Um, so yeah, as I said earlier, my husband puts things away for me, and he basically ends up piling anything he doesn't want to deal with into my craft room, which is already kind of cluttered to begin with, despite all your kind help in the past. Uh, but how do I get the motivation to put things away in their proper place when I can't even get to their proper places because there's all of that stuff? He's moved like 3 tables in there and just covered them up with stuff because he doesn't like where they are. And like, I probably would have put them away if he hadn't acted so precipitously. So I'll shut up and let you answer.
That is a great question, Lisa. And I get these kinds of questions a lot. And I like to joke that I'm not a marriage counselor. Like because, because I hear the question of how do I put things away when I don't have access to the space where the things go? But really the underlying question is how do I, at least my sense is the underlying question here is really, how do I get my husband to keep his stuff out of my space? I don't have an answer to that question. That is beyond my scope as the owner of a professional home organizing company. But what I can say is, figuring out how to negotiate with the people we live with, whether it's children, grandchildren, aging parents, spouses, partners, whatever. Like the negotiation process is really important. And sometimes my team and I will work with multiple people. We love to just have one person on site to communicate with, like one decision-making person. But sometimes we involve both people, and both people have to make decisions over shared spaces. And so there's a lot of negotiation, almost mediation that happens in those situations, because it's like, okay, what space is mine that I have agency over, and what space is yours? And so, for example, I just gave a presentation at the Gainesville Area Women's Network a month and a half ago, and 2 women came up to me after and said, "What do I do? My husband has too much stuff. Can you come get rid of his stuff for me?" I'm not a marriage counselor, and I'm also not a home wrecker, so we don't get rid of other people's stuff without their consent, of course. And so basically what I said to both of them is, can you negotiate so that the person who's more cluttered, in this case, it was both their husbands, were more cluttered than they would like to be in the world. And so containing the clutter, like the one husband has his own home office, and she's like, I just shut the door. I just let it go and I shut the door. Anytime we're cohabitating with another human of any relationship, it's a negotiation, and it's setting boundaries, which is something I do with my happiness coaching clients and home organizing clients all the time, because boundaries are magic. Boundaries are what create depth in our relationships and what prevent resentment from building, because resentment is ultimate relationship killer. And so having our boundaries and expressing our boundaries and following through with our boundaries, and I mean physical boundaries and in general, boundaries with our time, our energy, our money, everything. That's really vital, of saying, okay, I am not okay with you putting your stuff in my sewing room.
Mhm.
how do we work together to figure out a better solution? Because this is not working for me.
Mhm.
And then having consequences for those actions too.
Okay.
That's a
Thank
whole
you.
nother topic. You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
And
so
yeah, I would like to say a little bit about yeah, about grief, because there was a slide in one of my classes about the H word, which I think is offensive, and I really would rather we not use it. You know, people say hoarding, but it puts a whole stigma on people who have a lot of things, and it makes it, I think, harder for us to loosen up and feel okay. But there's because there's that sense of shame, and even if it's unspoken, there's certain words that have shame attached to them. So, but in grief, there was someone who actually told me they knew when they started collecting more than they wanted to collect in their home, and they knew the trauma, the actual traumatic event that it was, but they were not able to get a handle on it or work it. And things kept collecting and collecting and collecting, and sometimes it affects this person's health. So I just want to say sometimes it's because of something that we have suffered through and it is still not cleared. And you know, this goes to where Anna gave us the talk the other day about the gentle art of Swedish death cleaning, where it's cleaning, clearing, and we said preparing for a new year or a new day, whatever you want to think about it as. And so sometimes we have to just really look at the grief and get some support for that. Like you said, they'll just burst into tears, and it's awesome. To me, crying is nothing to apologize for. In fact, it's like a waterfall, it's a cleansing, a clearing. So that it just goes deep, and I just want to encourage people to love yourself and not be willing, like you say, boundaries. Those views of myself by myself are not acceptable here, and we will not have that here. Like, be your own mom and say, no, we're not going to be shaming over this. And sometimes we may not want to show someone our back room or our stuff, or even bring people to our home. There are kids who can't bring friends over much, you know, unless it's someone very kind and very special that doesn't mind how it is in the house. And so I just think that's really important. I just wanted to kind of say that, but sometimes we have to really work on what's inside that is causing this clogging. You know, it's like a psychological clogging that we have, emotional clogging. So, and on that note, I'm thinking it is about time to kind of wrap it up and at least let people go if they need to. And then if people want to stay longer, I don't mind staying on a bit longer.
I'm happy to stay too. And I haven't been keeping up with the chat just because I can't focus on being present with each of you in the chat. So I would love an opportunity to catch up on that. And I want to close and say one more thing, Shanti, related to all those beautiful things you just said, because I wholeheartedly agree with all of that. It's, you know, there's so much shame and embarrassment, and almost everybody who calls me during the phone consultation, I can feel it. I can feel their shame of, oh, I don't know if I want you in my home. And you know, I can feel like sometimes people even say it out loud. Oh, what if this is the worst you've ever seen? What if you can't help me? You know, it's like everyone's fearful of judgment. And so when I'm hiring over the years a new professional home organizer on my team, the main thing I look for is, are they compassionate and 100% non-judgmental? Like, I don't want as much as like a side eye from a person when they're doing their working interview process, which is like multiple stages to onboard. Like, I can teach them how to organize. Can I teach compassion? Kind of, but not. I want someone who's naturally non-judgmental, compassionate, just shows up like, how can I help? And so that's one thing I remind everyone during a phone consultation of working together, whether it's for virtual organizing or otherwise. We're there to help, not to judge. We're not guests in your home. We are there to be of service to you, to create more ease and joy in your life. And that's the underlying work of what it's really about.
So, and I just had a question about when we get this video shareable, which we're going to turn it into a shareable YouTube with a link. Certainly, we're not holding on to our events. We love to share them. So we will send them to everyone who, well, I could just send an email out to everyone who's on my email list, and be sure you put your email in the chat if you would like to receive it, and I don't have your email. And then the other thing I do want to mention again is that we'll be having a special yard sale April 12th, Saturday, and I would love to know who would like to actually participate in the yard sale and bring your things, have a table or lay out some stuff and make it really fun. So on that note, if anyone has to leave because it is 4 o'clock, please feel free, and thank you so much for being here.